So hello and welcome back to the MCC Brussels Podcast. I'm Jacob Reynolds. Do remember, if you're watching, enjoying, listening to us, please remember to hit the subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications on YouTube. That makes a big difference. We're trying to build out something of an alternative media here in Brussels, and we need your help and support. So keep commenting, letting us know what you're thinking, but also most importantly, like and subscribe. On today's podcast, well, we're going to be first off digesting pretty momentous news out of Germany about the breakdown of the firewall or the cordon sanitaire. We're also going to dive into Trump's increasingly incendiary rhetoric around Greenland. And we're going to finish off with a little discussion of whether recent developments mean that the era of net zero is drawing to a close. On the podcast today, delighted to welcome MEP Anders Vistisen.
Thank you for having me.
And welcome back to our colleague Richard Schenk.
Nice to be here, always.
And so we've been digesting really huge news out of Germany. I want to basically, Rich is very much our expert on all things German. The basic story, I mean, many of our listeners will be familiar with, but it's really a momentous Europe, not just for Germany, but for Europe as a whole. It's a momentous moment for Europe because this represents, Germany's been the kind of strongest version of the cordon sanitaire or the firewall for quite a long time. And for it to begin to break down in Germany is really quite important. But Richard, take us through what happened, a little bit on what happened in terms of finally a vote passing with the AfD support, but also why does it matter? Why is it so momentous?
I will begin with the last part of the question. Why does it matter? What was it about regarding policies? We had yesterday two non-binding resolutions in the parliament that were about migration. The first one got adopted in the end, and it was basically calling for the rejection of asylum seekers on the German borders, even if they come from, and of course, if they come from the other Schengen countries, so within to Austria, to France, or the other surrounding countries up to Germany. And it would have called on the minority government that is still in office to reject this entries on the German border. So Germany would have basically reversed this polarity from a magnet that is attracting migration in Europe to a country that is rejecting migrants into other European countries. So this would have serious consequences for the European Union's migration policies on the long term. But it's a non-binding resolution. And the minority government most likely will just ignore this resolution. Nevertheless, the political significance of this resolution is pretty high, especially because what the parties that voted in favor of it are leading in the polls. So most likely, these policies are going to be part of the next government's policies. And who voted in favor? Where this proposal was introduced by the CDU CSU by the Chancellor candidate Friedrich Merz, and got adopted by the votes of the Liberals, FDP, and the AfD, which was, of course, the cause of the outrage. And it already shows that even in the old parliament, there was always a majority in favor of strict migration policies. So 3 years ago, people already voted in favor of strict migration policies. But because of the cordon sanitaire, this majority couldn't influence policies, and it resulted in the left-leaning Scholz government whose policies being implemented for the last 3 years. And also quite interesting is that this was a very tight vote, so it was very important that all groups were disciplined, and they were disciplined. And even people within the CDU who were kind of left-leaning, they didn't vote against it. Otherwise, this proposal wouldn't have gone through parliament. And it shows that how much political winds are changing in Germany, that even the liberals, even the left-leaning parts of the CDU, even BSW, who abstained and made this vote possible by the abstention, they all worked together, and they basically just ignored all this cordon sanitaire talk by the Scholz government and sent a very strong message in amidst the election campaign in favor of strong migration policies.
Yeah, well, our viewers can check out our event from last night where we dug into the concept of the cordon sanitaire in a little more detail. But Anders, this is, I've mentioned that the cordon sanitaire has been, if you like, one of the kind of key practices of the whole EU kind of ruling elite. How momentous is this that it's broken down in Germany?
It's a very good sign, a very good step. Of course, they are in an election now, a very after contested election, and I think for the CDU, CSU, we also have to see them continue this policy after the elections, because one thing is to show non-binding resolution a couple of weeks before you hit the voting booths, but nothing is to implement it afterwards. Yeah. I think when we look to Scandinavia, where I'm from, we've seen parallel tracks. In 2001, Denmark broke the cordon sanitaire and was the first Western European nation to implement strict migration policies, with my party taking a leading role together with a liberal conservative government. We saw in Sweden a similar situation to what we've seen in Germany, that there was a right-wing majority that was not used by the right wing because they wanted to keep out the Sweden Democrats. That broke down in the last Swedish election. So in that sense, there is a lot of hope to be found in the Scandinavian model, where you see that including the conservative right is actually what's needed if you want to control migration, because you're never going to have parties like the SPD being serious about migration. So if it ends up being another grand coalition, as they call it in German, between the CDU, CSU and SPD after the elections, I think we will see German migration policy still stand again.
Yeah, it's a really important point, the degree to which those kind of properly right-leaning parties, patriotic parties, need to really hold the feet to the fire of these kind of establishment parties and make sure they deliver on their promises.
What we see is that so-called mainstream conservatives are only being conservative when they're threatened from the right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they have an inclination to bow down and make this, like, as we've seen in Brussels, grand coalition, as they call it. But it's basically a coalition of power, where it's a power grab, where they just want to keep all the power to themselves, but do nothing for the people, and that has to be challenged. Otherwise, it'll just continue on.
Yeah, and Richard, you sent a really helpful memo to our staff yesterday. But one of the things you picked up on that I think is really important is the vote comes just after lots of speeches around Holocaust Memorial Day, and for so long the kind of memory of the Holocaust had been turned into an excuse for not doing anything about migration and to question migration policies. People try and draw a straight line between that and the Holocaust. So, what was significant in that regard?
So the parliamentary session yesterday was the first part midday was about Holocaust memorial ceremony. Then there was a short break, and then the chancellor gave his speech on migration policies, and he literally began with, "Look, Holocaust memorial." He continuously used this Holocaust memorial ceremony and the stuff that was said there to draw a bridge all across to Europe to migration policies and say, look, strict migration policies are not possible because of the Holocaust. Look, the right to asylum and open border policies are the result of the Second World War and Nazism. So it was clearly that he wanted to use this Holocaust memorial ceremony for his short-term electoral campaign purposes, and especially for the Social Democrats, it was historically always a big thing that they define themselves as the anti-Nazi party. So obviously he was trying to play this to play into this tune. But I think nowadays we notice that strict migration policies and Holocaust are not necessarily the same. So this is was a step too far maybe, and I don't think this resonated too much with the people outside of the SPD bubble anymore. If you look into the polls, 60 to 80% regarding how you pose the questions are in favor of strict migration policies. This means a significant portion even of the left-leaning camp in the population now is changing the minds on migration, and this just constant evoking of Second World War Nazism doesn't work anymore to keep these voices at bay. And I think the chancellor made a big mistake with this strategy.
Yeah, well, one of the things that's kind of become clear, and as our director Frank Frady, we put out a video on this earlier about how this invocation of Holocaust actually really cheapens the actual memory of the Holocaust, and trying to make these comparisons is in a way kind of actually a far greater insult to the victims of Nazi terror and of the Holocaust than simply kind of demanding better migration policies.
I think you can go even a little bit further and say, what is the root cause of anti-Semitism in Europe today? I think that is the very large Muslim population with Islamist views that led into Europe. When I see the demonstrations in Copenhagen, in Berlin, in Amsterdam, in Brussels, pro-Hamas, pro-Jihad demonstrations, I see a lot of this diaspora that has been led into Europe, leading the charge together with the extreme left I have actually a Holocaust survivor. I had a Holocaust survivor on my parliamentary list for the European elections. He's my second substitute. The Danish head of the Zionist Union for more than 2 decades. I had a talk with him, and he's not a member of my party. He's actually a Danish social democrat, had been so for his entire life. And I asked him, when you look at Germany today and his family was Jewish refugees. They survived Holocaust. One parent was from Germany, the other was in Poland. They went to Denmark for security after the Holocaust. And I asked him, when you look today in Europe, why do you feel threatened as a Jewish person? Are you threatened to meet an AfD voter in the streets of Flensburg or Berlin? He said, no. What I'm afraid of is this very extremist Islamism that have entered into most of Western European societies.
I think this also led to this very broad coalition in the German party system in favor of strict migration policies. Because after the October 7th attacks on Israel, many people in the political center, on the left of the CDU, but also the liberals, they suddenly woke up and they saw, wait a second, this is not just some far-right propaganda that we have imported the problems with important anti-Semitism. This is something that's real, we can see every day on the streets. And for example, from the German liberals, the FDP, there were several people who were part of the pro-Israel campaigns and rallies in Germany, and they are constantly living under police threat nowadays. So this suddenly contributed to the change of mind in the political center.
Yeah. We saw in Copenhagen that some of these pro-Palestinian demonstrations ended up with people doing the Nazi salute. So I think that we need to be aware that of course, I think a famous historian who said that the new kind of fascism will not come in the same clothing as what it has been in the past. It will be a different beast altogether, and I think there's some truth to that. If it's just a replica, it's very easy to detect.
And so, I mean, we've mentioned on this podcast, I think the last time we were speaking, we said that the election of Donald Trump has posed lots of challenges, lots of opportunities too, but has kind of really forced a big reckoning moment in Europe. And those of us who consider ourselves populists and patriots many take a lot of kind of heart from some of the things that Trump managed to achieve, but it's thrown up some really significant questions. The most significant one at the moment for Europe is obviously the issue around Greenland. Anders, what's going on? Should we be worried? What's your take on this?
I think if you're a true patriot, the meaning of it is that you put your nation first, and then of course then of course you have some shared common beliefs with other patriot forces. I think it is a very stupid thing for the American president to be very focused on gaining territory from allied countries like the speech about Greenland, which has been Danish for 10 centuries, so 3 times longer than the US have existed. To put that into question is to derail his own agenda to a certain extent, and I don't think it's very useful or helpful for what should be, I think, the focus point of patriotic movements: getting back control over our borders, getting back control over illegal migration, and end the woke ideology that has flooded us from America. And those should be the centerpieces of a patriot politics, in my point of view. Now we are only sowing divisions over the Atlantic Ocean with this kind of rhetoric. Of course, we can accommodate a lot of American security concerns in the Arctic, and we don't mind doing so from the Danish side. There has been U.S. presence in Greenland since 1941, and it's not put into question by anyone. But to talk about invading allied nations is not something we would expect from allied countries.
Yeah, and what's your take on, because on one level, the response on the kind of European level has been quite interesting, because nobody's quite said it yet, but I mean, Macron said various things about possibly sending troops, whatever. We know these leaders can't be counted on, so you're not going to be looking to Macron or Tusk or anybody to defend democracy interests. How do we balance this moment where we can't take any kind of genuine European solidarity for granted?
No, but grand posturing is the same when he says he wants to send troops to Ukraine. But stopping you, if you really believe in that policy, you can do it. But of course, he's not going to do that. No, I think in the end, I think we should. My position is we just need to send a more clear signal to Trump that this is unacceptable, and we can argue with it, because, of course, military speaking, there's nothing we can do if US decides in the end to use military force to attack Greenland. But I think we are far from there, and I think there's a lot of Trump's rhetoric should not be taken literally. It should be taken seriously, but not literally. So we need to come to a conclusion on this, and we need to put it behind us. But in the end, if the US decided to invade Greenland, it would put a rift in the Atlantic Ocean and in the transatlantic understanding. And even now we are seeing opinion polls in the US, in Greenland and in Denmark, where the vast majority of people are rejecting this idea. Even the Republican base, and there's much more people against this idea than in favor of it. So I think you just have to move past this, and then we get on with what should be in the center of our focus, namely making our nations better for our people.
And Richard, in your take, I mean, what's behind the Greenland rhetoric? Some people dismiss it as kind of slightly mad from Trump. Other people think that there's maybe something more serious at play. What's going on?
I mean, it is a very strategic location. There's just everybody knows. We have heard several dozens of studies and speeches about the importance of the Arctic from a global point of view. It is the only point where the US and NATO are directly in contact with Russia, and also if there should be more global warming, it could become the most shortest route for Chinese trading. So obviously there are a lot of geopolitics involved in this area, and there's already a U.S. military presence on the island, a strong one, especially because of this result. The main thing why Trump's threat should be taken seriously, because once again we have been caught a bit, to put it mildly, a bit unprepared. So he has actually one point that maybe there should be more military presence in the Arctic, guarding the island from Russian and Chinese threats, or potentially other unrest. And also the big thing is that actually is a Greenlandish interior matter, is what should happen with the energy resources of the island. Obviously, Trump as a businessman is trying to bully them into some kind of deal, but this is actually something that the Greenlandish population has to decide. And as I understood, as an outsider, it's already a big issue within the different groups and within the different political parties there.
Yeah, and Anders, one of the questions, as Rich said, that this throws up is about being serious about defense. And for so long, lots of European countries have considered the end of history moment where nobody has to worry about wars anymore. We just kind of consume consumer products, and nobody has to worry about properly funding the military or thinking about military service and that. How are you reflecting on that situation in Denmark?
My party was the only one warning against leaving the territorial defense. We said we should not abolish the National Guard units that we have. We should not abolish the U-boats. We should not abolish the artillery, as the mainstream parties did during this peace dividend, as they called it. So in the end, we ended up with having a very small professional army that could go with the Brits and attack Afghanistan or Iraq or something, but could not defend the Danish territory. And now everyone suddenly found out that was a mistake. Denmark now, in a very broad coalition, decided to up defense spending to between 4% and 5% of GDP. So I think we are leading even in NATO terms there. But of course, we have some slack to catch up. But we will hopefully do that quite rapidly. But I think there is a lack of understanding in Europe in general to take defense more seriously. I think there is a little bit of north-south divide in for instance, let's take a country like Spain, a big European economy. They still don't even want to meet the 2% threshold that depends in NATO and so on. So there is something to be said for Europeans being too passive when it comes to be serious on their own defense.
Yeah. And is this a sign that in some way things to come, Richard? People talking about tariffs on the horizon. Is Europe in for a bit of a bumpy road?
Definitely, we are already on a bumpy road. So the question is how long and how bumpy the road it will get. We have everybody have realized nowadays that we have lost. We are not keeping up with the US regarding our economies. That we are not even able to provide enough. You don't have the industrial capacities anymore to provide for our own defense needs. Not even to speak about to Ukraine and these issues.
But I think that the fundamental problem is that the European leaders have not persuaded the free market that they're serious about defense. If the market did really believe that we were serious about defense, leveled up their capacity. But since we have now had the full-scale war in Ukraine for 3 years, Europe can still not make more artillery shells than North Korea.
Yeah.
But of course, a capitalist economy, even though I agree we're second behind the American world, a capitalist European economy, of course, should be able to outproduce North Korea tenfold. The only reason we are not able to do that is because the people who are manufacturing grenades, armored vehicle, tanks, missiles, and so on, do not believe that Europe is serious about spending on defense, because if they believe, they've locked the production. And they have not. They have what we have done so far is that we have made from one shift to 3 shifts a day. So we are now using the existing capacity to the maximum. But no, the serious investment has gone into new facilities, into new production. And that would have happened in any capitalist economy if the market believed in the politicians that they would spend on defense.
So, I mean, one of the questions this throws up is all about competitiveness and the economy. I mean, we saw this week the launch of maybe one of the most ridiculous political symbols that I can remember. And I'm British, so we saw many of those in British policy. But Ursula von der Leyen proudly launched what she called her competitiveness compass. As I say, one idea destined for the dustbin of history. But there's been a lot of chatter in the pan-European press this week about Ursula von der Leyen trying to row back on some of the green policies that have strangled Europe's economy for so long, that they're actually serious about kind of boosting investment and cutting red tape and all these kinds of things. So some people have gone as far to say that this means that the era of kind of green policies, maybe even net zero, is now called into question by von der Leyen. I'm slightly more skeptical about this, but Richard, what have you made of this supposed new drive for economic competitiveness?
Well, AfD, they have come to the realization, as I mentioned, but if you look into this, why is it a compass to begin with? Because it points into 4 different directions. And I'm not kidding, this was part of the official presentation. So it basically has different pillars and layers and then this kind of stuff. So it's as complicated as usually as we are accustomed from the European Union. It is throwing a bone to everyone, every country, every stakeholder group. The ideas in it are actually okay. So we have to be fair with them. So cheaper energy, who is against cheaper energy nowadays? Yeah. But to begin with, why are we even talking about cheaper energy? Because this Green Deal previously had the ridiculous assumption that we are going to be global climate leaders if we make energy more expensive through emission trading schemes, carbon taxes, carbon border adjustment mechanisms. And so to reduce emissions, we reduce production actually, because we reduce the energy supply, making it more expensive. Also, why are we talking about a new industrial there? Because we had the same issue that we wanted to shift into a more service-oriented economy, abandon basically neglected our industrial roots. So this was the whole reason why we now have to get out of this bumpy road, is because we were the first ones who steered our car onto this bumpy road. We will see there are some ambitious goals in this competitiveness compass. For example, they want to reduce bureaucracy by 25%, for small and medium enterprises even by 35%. So remember these figures because they were already announced some years ago. So almost exactly the same figures were announced 5 years ago when the first Ursula von der Leyen Commission took office. It went into exactly the opposite direction. So we should remind them of these numbers every now and then in the future. Anders?
I think the fundamental problem is that they don't get to the root causes of what is happening. Of course, the European economies are struggling because of very stupid policies that have been implemented. Most of it is in the Green Deal, but it's also other things like the GDPR directive, it is the CSD directive. It's all of this political newspeak, woke nonsense that has come in. And the fundamental truth is that America innovates, China copies, and then we legislate everything to that. And I think Reagan said it already 40, 50 years ago that this is a very stupid policy. The problem, I think, is that there is no, Western government who has said in the last 20 years that they don't want to reduce bureaucracy. But very, very few have succeeded. I think the only case study, Donald Trump had some success in his first term, But other than him, I think the only real good case study is from Canada, from I think, what's it called, the western part,
British Columbia.
yeah, British Columbia, where the regional government has this one rule in, two rules out, which they managed to practice for a lot of years. But seeing that implemented in Europe is completely unrealistic, because the entire tendency of Europe is to overregulate, because they have to find a one-size-fits-all model for everything. And that means tons of legislation. And every time they, for instance, try to hold out small and medium-sized companies from this legislation, the European Court of Justice has said the same principles have to apply all the way down, or the small companies are just let out of the production lines, because the big companies have to obtain these rules. And if they use a subcontractor, they have to prove that the subcontractor also have gender balance or do this and that. And then the bureaucracy is just trickling down, even though they are not directly affected, they indirectly have to obtain the same standards.
So to elaborate a bit more on this issue, in the new competitiveness compass also wants to regulate space technology, quantum, and biotech. So
It'd be nice if we had enablers, right?
yeah, sure. I mean, we don't even have much of those technologies, and we already want to regulate those. We still see this legacy approaches that the Europe wants to regulate space technology, even though we don't have any space. Okay, we have some. The French-led efforts are pretty good, but why do we even regulate it? Why is this somehow the key to innovation, that we need to pass European legislation on this? And often enough, European legislation is completely overly complicated. So one of the things that now should be simplified is the so-called corporate sustainability reporting directive. So we forced all the companies in Europe and businesses to report on the environmental impact of the business. The directive itself contained 24 data points that should be reported. The implementing directive by the European Commission expanded this list by another 400. So this is exactly what you say, that once you want to apply these European regulations equally to all across the Europe, which is very diverse in its economy and society, by its nature, it's going to be complicated and it will stifle innovation. So we should not only have European economic policies in the center, but also what is the role of the member states, in regaining our innovation.
And the worst thing even is that the Commission openly admit that they don't know what they're going to use all this data for. They just want the companies to produce it. And the only sector that will grow is lawyers and accountants. They will have a field day with it. And I think just one thing that we could add on to this is now all of this fear-mongering over big tech. And that already produced this week a number of suggestions from the political parties and commission on how to regulate tech even more in Europe, while in the US they are losing the grip on and making big tech come into fruition as a driver of the economy. And we are seeing now with the Chinese also coming in with these IA models that seems to be even more competitive than the US ones, that Europe is just lost. We know where to be found in the sector.
So thanks for joining us on the MCC Brussels podcast. As I said, please do like and subscribe and share with everyone you're involved in. If you've got contacts you think we need to know about, please let us know in the comments. Any great podcasters from around Europe, we're interested in meeting them. But for now, thank you, Anders.
Thank you so much for having me on.
And Richard, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.